As the world becomes more connected than ever during these unprecedented times, organizations become more prone to cyber attacks. Hi everyone, my name is Daniel Wu, and today I will be presenting why cybersecurity mesh is one of Gartner's top emerging technology trends in 2021. By 2025, the cybersecurity mesh approach will support over 50% of digital access control requests. This is a significant forecast in a very short period of time. But what is it, and how do we get there? Let's take a brief look at how cybersecurity was in the past and why this new approach will become the new norm. Not long ago, most organizations operated at a specific location and provided authorization to employees to a secured local server. This means that for a majority, that if you're not physically in the workplace, you will not be able to access the company's shared files and thus are unlikely to get collaborative work done. Now fast forward to 2021, and it is evident that this is no longer the case. The global pandemic, that is COVID-19, propelled the adoption of remote work, which grew by 44% in the last 5 years. In fact, according to a study by North One, over 55% of the total US workforce are now remote workers, and 16% of the companies worldwide are fully remote. Under these new circumstances, the old method of authorization, which provided a single point of authorization to a localized network, will become obsolete. Security services had to move to the cloud to enable the massive surge in remote work. But as more devices access sensitive company information in the cloud, the threat of cybersecurity increases. This is where cybersecurity mesh comes in. According to Gartner, a cybersecurity mesh is a modern security approach that consists of deploying controls where they are most needed. This is accomplished in a manner that is composable, scalable, flexible, and resilient. It is a distributed architecture that adds synergetic value via better integration and requires significantly less staff time to deploy and maintain. What this all means is that IT leaders should transition their cybersecurity frameworks into a modular architecture, one that can select and assemble various components together to satisfy specific user requirements. For example, based on user profiles and company policies. The cybersecurity mesh will be responsible for adaptive access, content control, security configuration, access monitoring, and security response. Now, although cybersecurity mesh may sound new, its architectural model was conceptualized 20 years ago. Companies just lacked the incentive and the convenience to take on the necessary tools to leverage this technology. The cost benefit to establish a cybersecurity mesh did not warrant the adoption, but now that there are dedicated cybersecurity companies that offer this architecture as a service. This security as a service enables companies to adopt a robust cloud infrastructure and avoid the high capital investment by paying a subscription fee. The cybersecurity mesh opportunity can be summarized in 3 categories. Its main trigger was the sudden global shift to remote work due to COVID-19. As more people access data on mobile devices, businesses needed a solution to secure data in a scalable and sustainable fashion. Next are the drivers, and some of these drivers include the adoption of remote work, new security standards, so for example, the identity-first security approach, and also outsourcing to cybersecurity vendors. This acts as a way to reduce cost and also leverage the infrastructure of cloud computing. Lastly, the implementation of cybersecurity mesh will affect these key players: the organizations, cybersecurity vendors, IT groups, and employees in both office and remote settings. We will now cover the drivers for cybersecurity mesh in more detail, starting with the adoption of remote work. Prior to COVID-19, remote work was typically reserved for executives, senior staff, an employee based outside of the office, for example, sales rep and certain IT groups. However, the global pandemic drove the unprecedented shift to enable remote work. According to a Gartner study in 2021, an average of 64% of employees are able to work from home, and 2 out of 5 are actually working from home right now. This trend is projected to continue, with many organizations planning to adopt a hybrid work model. In order to enable this new reality, organizations need to plan for this permanent migration, which involves a total reboot of security systems and tools to adapt the modern workplace. A cybersecurity mesh is the ideal architecture that supports such a demand in terms of composability and scalability. They need to identify all the users that require access, which devices that will be used, and where this access needs to be provided. This approach will supply the appropriate security levels and mitigate the risk while not affecting productivity. This leads to the second reason why cybersecurity mesh is trending. Identity first is a security model that defines and manages the roles and access privileges on an individual at any time and any place. Alongside the zero trust model, it is centered on the belief that organizations should not automatically trust anything inside or outside its perimeters, and instead verify everything trying to connect to its systems before granting access. Interestingly again, this model was conceptualized as far back as 2010, but was not widely adopted until COVID-19 happened. The identity-first security requires a robust architecture, like the cybersecurity mesh. But with the technology widely available now, organizations can now centralize their approach in granting authorization to the appropriate people, regardless if they're remote or office-based. An example of identity-first security is multi-factor authentication, a security method that significantly reduces the risk of unauthorized access by enforcing 2 or more authentication mechanisms. You may have used your phone, your tablet, or other devices in addendum to gain access to your account, such as Gmail or Amazon account. And according to IBM, the average cost of data breaches was $1.76 million more at an organization without zero trust security as compared to one with a mature zero trust security. Lastly, organizations are now opting for cybersecurity mesh because it is now becoming more and more affordable via security vendor consolidation. As mentioned earlier, establishing a cybersecurity mesh is costly and may require many years to develop and integrate depending on the number of applications a company uses. Fortunately, organizations can bypass this challenge by outsourcing the legwork to dedicated security vendors. These vendors would be responsible for setting up the security infrastructure and integrating all the applications so that the users can access them securely in the cloud network. By pursuing security vendor consolidation, organizations can simplify their operations and reduce overall costs. This is becoming more and more attractive, with as many as 51% of organizations planning to pursue the strategy in the next 2-3 years, according to a 2020 Gartner study. An example of a company that provides security as a service is Cisco Systems, who are best known for their enterprise networking gear. They are also a major player in the cybersecurity market by offering enterprise customers a full-fledged cybersecurity platform. Customers can pick and choose which components to use and add more products as their needs changes, which is one of the major advantages of going with a cybersecurity mesh. This segment has been a lucrative business for Cisco. The segment alone generated $3.4 billion in revenue this year, which represents a 7% growth from the year before. With over 300,000 security customers, 61 million endpoints, and 840,000 networks, Cisco sees its total security market opportunity hitting $80 billion by 2025. This demonstrates that there is a demand for better cybersecurity. Let's now go over who benefits from implementing cybersecurity mesh and the potential risks they're exposed to. The organization benefits from a robust cloud security that protects sensitive data in both remote and in-office settings. Identity-first security model is employed to decrease the risk of data breaches, which could cost organizations millions of dollars from lost customer information and customer trust. The risk of implementing cybersecurity mesh is that the organization may not see the cost-benefit gain until 2-3 years, mainly because of the high capital investment and the highly trained IT staff required. This is why many organizations are now opting for the security vendor consolidation, so that they can outsource the service and maintenance to the experts. This allows the organization to simplify their operations, reduce their overall cost, and free up more time to better focus on their core businesses. Cybersecurity vendors benefit by establishing business partnerships through their security as a service model. Having already established the infrastructure, their focus is to provide their service through business partnerships and increase their revenue streams. One of the biggest risks for cybersecurity vendors is the lack of requirements when building and integrating the mesh for their customers. Ambiguity in requirements is a common issue that is known to increase lead time and costs. IT groups benefit from the centralized approach in the identity-first security model, which is enabled by the cybersecurity mesh. Their role would be to enforce company policy and generate unique user identification to facilitate the cybersecurity. The risk for IT groups in implementing the cybersecurity mesh is to familiarize with the new IT security system. Either they will be responsible for developing and maintaining their own cybersecurity mesh, or they have to learn how to operate the platform from the vendor, which would take time and budget for training. The last player is the backbone of every organization, the employees. Implementing cybersecurity mesh benefits employees because it enables flexibility to work anytime at any place. Remote work helps people save on time and money on transit, and is also known to increase productivity at work. The biggest risk of cybersecurity comes from the employees themselves. A majority of data breaches happen when an employee accidentally opens or downloads from an unknown source. Cybersecurity groups are actively working on prevention techniques, such as blocking all USB ports on company devices and developing algorithms to detect fishy emails. As of 2020, phishing is by far the most common attack performed by cybercriminals, with the FBI Internet Crime Compliance Center recording over twice as many incidents of phishing than any other type of computer crime. Technical feasibility for implementing cybersecurity mesh depends on 3 factors. In terms of technical merit, organizations can adopt the mesh by outsourcing the security services and maintenance to expert vendors. This approach will save both time and cost and enable organizations to put their efforts in their business operations instead. In terms of tools and ecosystems, a cybersecurity mesh is a cloud infrastructure that offers the scalability and accessibility to host dedicated security services reliably and conveniently. Some of the challenges of implementing a cybersecurity mesh includes organizational buy-in to adopt the security as a service, because not all companies are willing to put their data in someone else's hand. If they were to take on the initiative themselves, then the organizations need to be aware that the investment may not see cost-benefit returns until 2-3 years later. According to Gartner, cybersecurity mesh will become more than just a trend. Not only will this approach support over half of the digital access control requests, by 2025, 75% of large corporations will be actively pursuing a vendor consolidation strategy, 50% of large organizations will adopt privacy-enhancing computation, and 40% of the board of directors will have a dedicated cybersecurity committee, up from 10% today. With that said, organizations will want to plan ahead. Gartner suggests the following to implement a cybersecurity mesh effectively. First, evaluate to develop in-house or to outsource. Organizations need to evaluate the internal and external factors that drive the need for vendor consolidation or to develop in-house. Next is to plan for a multi-year transition. These strategies typically take 2 or more years to execute and realize the benefits. Next is to establish key metrics or KPIs to measure the expected business values of implementing the mesh, such as simplified operations, reduction in total cost, and reduction in phishing occurrences. In addition to the presentation, I also included a summary of the ETAC approach in evaluating the emerging trend of cybersecurity mesh. To conclude, I would like to leave the group with 3 distinct takeaways. First is balance. Companies must not only invest in enabling remote work, but they also need to invest in the required security that protect the access and transfer of their data. Next is prevention. Having a cybersecurity mesh brings many benefits, but it does not guarantee a bulletproof vest against cybercrime. What most people don't realize is that code 18 is the most common source of cybercrime, also known as 18 inches from the screen, which is the user. This makes the user the #1 risk in cybersecurity, which is why organizations need to train their staff regularly to reduce the risk of data breaches. Next, I would like to suggest that organizations should prioritize cybersecurity mesh more as we progress to the hybrid work model. With more cyber attacks recorded now than ever, implementing cybersecurity mesh should be initiated sooner than later. Here are the references to the articles used for the presentation. And I'd like to thank the group for listening in, and I'll take any questions. Thank you very much and have a great evening.